Hi friends, my name is Christina Grozik. I'm with the Going Collective, and tonight we have kombucha for gut health with Hannah Crum. So Hannah is known as the Kombucha Mama, and she's also the author of the Big Book of Kombucha. So we're going to talk tonight about gut health, kombucha, and we're probably going to explore a few other things along the way. So hello and welcome, Hannah. It's so exciting to have you here. I'm really excited for our discussion tonight. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Christina. I'm just loving your background and wish I could hear some tinkling chimes and gongs bonging.
Oh, thank you. And likewise, I'm like, oh, look at all the colors and the book in the background. That is the book in the background. So very, very cool. So, where do we start? You do so much. I mean, I just listed two things, right, in terms of your work with kombucha, but I mean, you're all over the place with it. I mean, you have this organization that's this global organization. You're an advocate for gut health with kombucha. You're passing all kinds of stuff. We can get into some of this stuff, but we may have people saying, well, I've heard this word. I don't really know what that is. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what kombucha is?
Absolutely. We'll begin at the beginning. Kombucha is fermented tea. So, we know all kinds of fermented foods and drinks: beer, wine, cheese, sauerkraut, kimchi, kvass. Maybe you even know about water kefir or TB or milk kefir. And so kombucha is in this whole family of fermented foods and drinks, but it's an acetic acid ferment. That's like vinegar. And that means it has a little bit of a tangy flavor to it. It's got this like sweet sour punch. And so I like to think of it as easy drinking tea vinegar that we harvest before it gets too sour. And so it's got some real superpowers in there. Tea is the key. Now let's talk tea, Camellia sinensis, so the tea plant. I know there's a lot of things we call tea, chamomile tea, peppermint tea, but they aren't from the tea plant. And so this specifically refers to that plant. So green tea, black tea, white tea, um, oolong, pu'er, sencha, bancha, right? Like there's all kinds of tea out there. And all of them can be fermented by what we call a mother or a SCOBY. And this is basically a white flexible pancake of bacterial cellulose. And it stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And so the bacteria build this like little rubber raft and the yeast hang off of it. And together they ferment the sugar and the tea and they turn it into healthy organic acids that support liver function, that help boost metabolism, they aid in digestion. And a lot of people report it just makes them feel good.
It's really, I mean, that's so incredible. And I remember the first time I saw it because I had been drinking, I had some gut issues. So someone had suggested, well, you should try kombucha. And I did, and I started feeling better. And I'm like, oh. And the first time I saw a SCOBY, I'm like, what is that? And they're like, well, this is what makes the kombucha really magical, and it puts all the good ingredients in it. And I'm like, oh, But after I changed my lens and my perspective on it, I'm like, well, thank you, little magical creature. you know?
It
But
does look a little funky at first. And so some of the old terms were like mushroom. And part of that is because it looks sort of like a mushroom cap. So imagine you have a big white mushroom cap. That's what the culture looks like. And then it was also called a jellyfish. And so that's sort of apropos because we have these like wavy yeasty bits that hang off of it. And in fact, even the word kombucha. So cha means tea in Chinese and several languages, like chai in India. That's referring to tea. And kombu is a type of brown seaweed. Well, not sure if you'll see them in here. We have a few little brown wavy bits of yeast hanging out here, right? See? And so maybe people saw the brown wavy yeast and thought, that looks like kombu, a brown seaweed, kombucha. We don't totally know. But again, some of those other names are like the tea of long life, the gout jellyfish. And so all of these things just sort of hinted at that even ancient human beings understood that consuming this helped them feel better, helped them have a better quality of life when they were consuming it on a regular basis.
so, Hannah, would it be proper to say yeast particles in there that you just showed us? Okay.
Yeah, so yeast strands or culture strands, yeasty bits, yeasty beasties.
Okay, and
They
those
all work.
are okay to consume because I know once in a while if you buy the bottled kombucha or if you make it, right, you'll get some of those in your beverage like you just showed us.
And
So
it's personal choice, right? So like yeast are pretty clever in that they contain all the B vitamins in living form, even that ever elusive B12. And it's a clever process because they have to have human beings to cultivate them in order to stay alive. Now there's wild yeast and they'll feast off of like, like when you have that little bit of sort of dust on a piece of fruit or something. Like you might pull a plum off a tree and it has a little blush, or grapes that have that's yeast. They're like living on those skins. And if we just allow them to proliferate, they would eat those sugars and ferment it. And that fruit would eventually have a little bit of alcohol in it. It would fall to the ground. The animals would eat it because, we all sort of crave a little bit of alcohol, being bacterio sapiens. And so when we talk about the yeast and the bacteria fermenting the sugar, the yeast start working right away. So we're using sugar, table sugar, cane sugar, which is sucrose. The yeast excrete an enzyme. It cuts the sucrose into glucose and fructose, which is easier for the microorganisms to consume. So the bacteria use the glucose to create our glucuronic acids. These are the ones I was mentioning that really help our healthy liver. They're also, of course, creating acetic acid from the alcohol being produced by the yeast. So all yeasts are going to create a little bit of alcohol in kombucha. However, unlike in beer or wine, where it can get like, or it just keeps going up, because we're a vinegar, the acetic acid bacteria will take the alcohol and turn it into these great acids, including acetic acid, which has a lot of benefits, which is why taking raw apple cider vinegar has been known to have a host of benefits. So you think of tea and its anti-cancer fighting properties, it's high in antioxidants. You add the power of vinegar with its cholesterol fighting properties. We merge them together, and this is why kombucha is this amazing superpower, and it's so easy to make at home. It's really delicious.
yeah, there's so many questions to ask you, but let's step back for a second. So you told us where the word maybe or originated from, right? So where did actually kombucha originate? Do we know where the fermenting tea originated from?
We assume Asia, China most likely, because tea was cultivated there for, I mean, it's been cultivated for 5,000 years. Chinese are famous for their quest for longevity elixirs. They will ferment anything and everything all throughout Asia, fermentation. And actually, every ancient culture had some form of fermentation. So, fermentation is ubiquitous. It's human beings evolved with bacteria and yeast. And there is no separation between our evolution as human beings and the coevolution of these fermentation cultures and bacteria and, our microbiome. And this is what we're talking about, right? The kombucha in the gut. Our microbiome is populated by all kinds of, virus, yeast, bacteria, things, this massive diversity, like a whole universe, a whole city is living inside of us, ideally, right? Now we live in modern society where we've come into contact with lots of things that exterminate organisms in our body. We've sort of been antibacterial for quite a while, not realizing how crucial they are to our health and safety.
Well, that's really interesting. So, was it thought like, okay, you consume a meal and then you have this tea after it, or you wake up and you drink it, or maybe it's something you do? Was there a ritual behind when you have it, or any?
Well, since we don't have any written records as to its origins, it's uncertain what exactly or how exactly, but how people have enjoyed it is absolutely. So there's several ways we can do it. First, it can be first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. I like to do that, especially if you're a newbie. And people will ask, how much should I drink? Right? Everyone's worried about dose because this is what our society pushes us towards. Like, what's the dose? How much am I supposed to take? And the reality is, it's like listening to your body, to your biofeedback. You're enjoying it. Now you're in the bathroom and that's uncomfortable. Okay, dial it back, increase your water, take it easy. Your body's like getting activated by enjoying it. If you're drinking it, you feel really good and you want to have more, have more. But I like to do it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach to feel how it's working in my body, because we're so disconnected from what we put in our body and how it makes us feel. Like we only focus on taste, right? Because that's what sells. Marketing wants you to only focus on fun and gratification and taste, and who cares how many calories it has, and who cares if it makes you feel like crap later. What's important is you're enjoying it right now. And so when we close those biofeedback loops, that, like, for example, you have candida overgrowth. So again, candida is something everybody has in their system. It's only when it's allowed to over proliferate that it becomes an opportunistic pathogen, meaning it isn't pathogenic unless there's an opportunity for it to become out of balance. And so what will happen is it will demand sugar because that is what Candida wants to thrive on, or it'll demand carbs. And you're thinking, oh, I'm craving this. I'm trusting my gut. My body wants this. But then when you realize you're feeling bloated and gassy and you don't feel good, that's when trust your gut isn't about trusting your taste buds. It's about also educating yourself. So I'm consuming these foods, but I'm having this reaction. What's the underlying cause of what's going on? Once you're educated, then you can start to choose foods that nourish and support that. And sometimes we need additional support from supplements and probiotics and different things because we're just that far removed from having a healthy, diverse microbiome. So we're all in this toxic planet together, trying to survive and trying to find tools that help us. And kombucha is a great way into learning more about fermented foods. One thing I'll just say is that, it's not for everybody. Coffee isn't for everybody. There are many things in life where like everybody loves them, but maybe a few people don't. And that's fine. And that's because there's more than one way to get the nutrients we need. Mother Nature is very wise in the way she distributes her nutrients. And so if you tried kombucha and didn't think it was right for you, well, first of all, I'd say try it again at some point, but you'd be surprised. It has some really great complex flavors, but also don't feel like you have to try it just because everybody else is. I would say, give it a try because it can have this real potential positive effect in your life and be open to that. But if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and I love the way you just broke that down. I really do. But can we go back to two words here, just in case someone's like, "Well, what was that?" The microbiome, sorry, word, tongue tied, right? So maybe too much coffee on my end today.
It
Um,
happens.
but Candida, if we can talk about Candida and kind of maybe define what that is for someone that may not be familiar with that term.
Yeah, sure. I mean, these days it feels like everybody knows about what's wrong with people because there's so much autoimmune disease. Candida is a species of yeast, and there are many, many, many strains within that species. So typically, when we're talking about Candida overgrowth, it's Candida albicans. There are some other ones as well, but that's the main one we're talking about. And this happens when you're overexposed to antibiotics, or if there's some sort of like, let's say you were born from a C-section. That means you didn't come through the vaginal canal, and so at least many, they've only recently started recognizing that children born coming out of the stomach instead of the vaginal canal means that they don't get the same dose. They get a different dose of organisms that then colonize the skin. And if you don't get the ones from the mother, from her birth canal, then they end up with a higher instance of allergies and lowered immunity. And that's simply because, again, Mother Nature is so brilliant in her ways that as soon as a woman gets pregnant, the pH, the microbiome of her vagina changes in order to create the organisms that the new child is going to need once it comes through that canal. And so one of the ways, now that this has been recognized, the modern world will deal with it is they will swab the mother's vagina and wipe it on the child, even if it's come out through C-section, in order to give it that microbial advantage. I can see you're really excited, right? It's exciting stuff. And also we inherit our microbiome from our mother. And so if our mother has had gut dysbiosis, or if she's been, and generationally, this has eroded over time. And this is why we see such a high instance of gut dysbiosis, of autoimmune disease. It's because we're just out of balance right now as a species. The good news is we have a lot of great ways we can get back into balance. Kombucha is only one of many, 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 many tools out there in the toolbox.
I had no idea. I had no idea that that was the case, that coming through the vaginal canal was very different, with what you're taking with you from that. Never knew that. But I think that's awesome that they've created a way to add whatever those things are that you gather, right, to the
Yeah.
person. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it makes sense now that you're saying it and to hear it, but it's never something I would have thought like, oh, well, that would be different. I mean, different, for the mother.
Right, right. It's something that I think nobody thought of, which is why for so many years, when we're having these C-sections, and sometimes they're necessary and sometimes they're just convenient. It just depends on your situation as to why that's happening. But there wasn't a recognition of how vital that was. In fact, it really wasn't until the Human Genome Project, which is all the way back in 2000, and then the Human Microbiome Project was started in 2010. So what happened is, as they were engaging in the Human Genome Project, the idea was, let's sequence every piece of DNA in the human genome. This will allow us to develop novel cures to genetic diseases, but they had no idea the Pandora's box they were opening. And it wasn't, what they were seeing is that scientists knew there was bacteria inside and on our bodies, but they did not understand the role they played. So they just ignored them. They're like, well, we don't understand this, just ignore it. And what they came to realize is they could not complete the human genome sequence until they understood the microbiome. And that's what initiated the Human Microbiome Project in 2010. And so here we are 11 years after that. And so much information has, emerged about how this relationship with our environment, with our ecosystem, with the foods we're putting in our body, with the types of soaps and deodorants and water, like all of the products that we apply to our human body have an impact. Your skin's your largest organ and it's very porous. Fluoride in the water, like there's so many different ways in which we're being poisoned, unfortunately, in our current society that, we're under assault. And so our bodies, while they've been able to evolve somewhat, this is where coming back to these traditional foods, coming back to traditional ways of farming the land, coming back to traditional ways in which, Native Americans stewarded forests and things like this, and were, lived in the dirt. Now, I'm not saying we all go back and live in teepees, but, even just getting in the garden and allowing your hands to get dirty. Like there's a reason kids, right, soil-based organisms is what you're getting in your body when you're eating a mud pie. Just don't eat it out of the Roundup. You just don't want to be putting Roundup in there. So as long as we're, engaging with the planet in her natural state, and it's not to say there aren't pathogens or this or that. Of course there are. No one's saying run out and drink muddy water. You have to be smart, of course, but we can also be a little more freer than we thought because we need contact with these microorganisms.
Yeah, I mean that makes so much sense. And a lot of the things that I teach, we talk about interconnectedness. So, and that's exactly what you're pointing to, is how all of this is connected. The way that we're treating the earth, the way we treat ourselves, what we're putting in our body, what we're putting on our body. It's amazing to me, and I've worked with clients that they'll make sure they have the perfect diet, they'll work out, and they'll do all of this stuff, right? But then, like, they'll tell me about something like a lotion they're using or something they're putting on their body, and I'm like, your biggest organ, your biggest organ is your skin. So you're taking all this time and you're putting so much thought into all of these other things, but that's so important as well, is what we're putting on our skin and the environment that we're surrounding ourselves by and what we're being exposed to. And I love that you just said that. I really do.
And go the next level, the information you're being exposed to. We unfortunately, while we love to think we're in the greatest government in the world, our government is owned by chemical companies, right? Like we think the FDA is independent, they're not. And so, and this is like, to me, the really frustrating, like, I don't even know how you operate morally as a business in the United States when you have to make a product cleaner to sell in Europe, and yet you sell the dirty, toxic stuff here to the United States. Like, how do you even operate as a business and feel good about yourself? It makes no sense to me. Just because it's allowed, just because you can, doesn't mean you should. And so if we're gonna have an FDA that like won't investigate chemicals and the 80,000 plus chemicals that are in, period panties, tampons, beauty products, food supply. I mean, the list goes on and on. Every single thing you come into contact with. And then these businesses are going to just do it because they can, this is what happens. The onus shifts to us. We have to become the informed consumer. We have to let our money be a political statement, in the sense that We choose to engage with businesses we trust because we know their products are not going to cause us harm. I mean, we've heard about the awful lawsuits, the, asbestos in the talcum powder that they knew about and didn't get rid of. I mean, again, how do we stand by and allow these corporations to continue to poison us knowingly, and not be so completely outraged? But outrage only gets you so far, right? And so we shift outrage into action, and the way we do that is by finding the people in our communities who's making these things. And if they're not, great, now there's a niche where you can create a business that's going to help other people. Because I really think people coming back to these traditional ways is novel, right? Like when those things are missing, it becomes new again. But coming back to those traditional arts and crafts and creating those products, selling them at your farmers market, getting them into people's hands. And there's so many people that are part of this movement. It's amazing. Like, you are not alone. If you're trying to figure out what should I be using, what's good, what's bad, and it's frustrating at first, right? Because you have to realize you're being lied to. And that can be challenging because it challenges your whole worldview. But we really are in this time where I think we're ready. We're ready to be challenged, to come together, to figure out how we get healthy. Because when we do that, then we're not so exhausted. We don't have this brain fog. We're not struggling with all this autoimmune disease. Now we can reinvest into our community. We can come back and become community activists because finally we are strong and healthy in our bodies. But it takes time. And, I'm just as poisoned as everyone else. And, I'm doing everything I can. Not everything I can, many things, but not everything, like we're all in different parts of that process. But the more we teach each other, educate each other, support each other, I think we've got a real opportunity to take that stand and say, hey, we're not going to tolerate this anymore.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And often I know I've heard people will feel overwhelmed or they feel like there's nothing they can do. And
Mhm.
I'll tell you, pointing back to what you just said, there is something you can do. Choose who you are supporting. Choose who you are giving your money to. Because
Mhm.
if everyone stopped putting their money into those companies and those products, right, that would make a
Right.
pretty significant dent in them. Support your local, your local folks. Do some research, and that's the part is people say, well, I have no idea where to find this stuff. Start talking to people. Figure it out. Talk to people, get to know the people in your community, read your labels. If there's something on there that you do not recognize, literally, like when I take clients to the grocery store, that's usually our first trip when I meet up with a client. We go to the grocery store, I tell them, bring your list, block out a couple of hours, we're going grocery shopping. And they'll say, well, it doesn't take me a couple of hours to go grocery shopping. I'm like, it will today. You know? And every single item, I'm like, what do you think's in that? And they're like, well, I mean, I don't know. I buy this all the time. I'm like, but what are you eating? What do you think's in that? Like, I wanna pause, stop, read the label. Is there anything in there you don't recognize that term? And if they don't, I'm like, cool, let's pull out our phones and look it up. And it's a process, but then when they
Yeah.
realize like what some of these things are, they're like, well, how can that be in our food? How can that be allowed to be in there? That's a great question. But you know what? Let's put it back on the shelf, right? And let's
Mhm.
find another option because there's other options available. And I think, like you said, there's more and more coming together into the surface, and people are like waking up to this and they're saying, why am I putting this in my body or on my skin? This is toxic to me. No wonder I don't feel good,
Right.
So
Yeah, and it's sneaky stuff like fragrance. What the heck does that even mean? But here's the good news. I think you're right. I think farmers market is like, you don't know where to start, just go to the farmers market. Just observe, try things, talk to people, and you're going to start to, first of all, you'll be engaging with community. You're going to find people who really care. Look, they're showing up on a Saturday to connect with you, and it's not just because they love selling things, right? Like they're there because they feel passionate about what they do. So whether that's a farmer or a small business who's creating, deodorant and beauty products, like they're doing it because they care. And so that's a really great place to get connection, to meet people. They're going to have books to, they suggest, they're going to have websites, because unfortunately a lot of information is now being censored. Like you don't get access to it. And part of that is we have a monopoly, right? Like, when the internet came along, who knew? And now Google is the search engine, right? And but thankfully other options are coming up and people are finding different ways to get the information they want. But the reality is herbalism, plants, they've been here longer than we have. And so it's foolish to think that, and I'm not saying that science doesn't, there aren't things we can't learn and discover and elevate, but the reality is so much of what we can do just for maintenance, for prevention, for just trying to, be a healthy human being comes from Mother Nature. And that's beautiful because it means that we can learn, which we're thirsty to learn these things. What I love about North Carolina, which where you guys are based, is there's a lot of like outdoor school or wood school. Like children can go out into the woods and learn about nature. And I think as human beings, we crave that relationship. And it can be challenging when you live in a city to carve that out. But it really is like there's no separation between humans and nature. Like the fact that we even have different words for it is weird because we everything is nature.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, totally agree. Yeah, I love that. I love the way you just phrased that. I think these are really important topics to bring up, and even something like you brought up fragrance, right? And I think natural flavoring. If
Right.
anybody out there's like, well, this says it's natural, maybe you might want to just consider looking up what constitutes natural flavoring, because I got to tell you, the first time it came into my awareness was the last time that I bought something that said natural flavoring on it. So it may be something just to check out. I'm just saying. So, but I think knowledge it's the key to change, right? So information is the key to change. And I know some people say, well, I'd rather just not know. I think you do want to know, because when you do know and you have these tools in place and you can make decisions that are going to benefit you, and everything in your system's connected. So when you start making some of these changes, because now you have the tools, because you have the knowledge, right, to make different choices, then you start feeling better. And it goes back to, Hannah, what you said earlier about, you may not like feel good if you're drinking too much, or you're drinking it at certain times, or maybe your body's going to tell you, and if your body's saying like, hey, but then also knowing, well, what am I putting in my body that's making me feel that way? So it's becoming informed first, because when you do clean out the body, right, when you do clean out the body, then the body's going to tell you. But first you have to know, like if you're craving sugar, right? You may be craving sugar because it's feeding something in the body that's not healthy. But when you clean that system out, then you're going to know, okay, well, this isn't feeding something, this isn't good for me. Being bloated is not good for me, right? So I know whatever I just took in to create that, it is creating that. So now I know to eliminate it. But like Hannah said, becoming informed, so important, because then you have different choices that you can make, and options. And who doesn't want options, right? So yeah,
Exactly.
great to have
Well, and
options.
there's so much reductionism, right? Like fat makes you fat. It's not true. Or like all sugar's bad. No, the people usually pushing that. I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking about, aspartame made in a lab that gives rats cancer? Are we talking about a grass that human beings have cultivated for 5,000 years? Are we talking about, sugar that every single being on the planet needs to consume in some form or fashion? Are we talking about things that bypass the natural feedback loops in the brain and leave you craving more, right? Like it frustrates me when people want to talk about sugar tax, but they don't tax the diet sodas. I'm like, these are the things that are actually toxic and harmful to human beings, not the stuff that has. And this is the problem, like we're like, what's the dose? What do the numbers say? But how important, like when all we're doing is reading numbers, you're not actually getting real information, because what you should be reading is the quality of the products you're consuming, not just the quantity or the numbers, because you can eat something that has a high caloric value, but it has all these nutrients that supply your body, not just with fuel to function, but nutrients that make you feel good, that repair your immune system, that elevate your quality of life. And so, because we've been trained by advertising into what does all this mean, like the same issue comes up when you look at a commercial kombucha. Like you might look at it and you look at the sugar grams, like, well, that's really high, I'm not going to drink that. But what's not listed on that label is the fact that the sugar is pre-digested. It's already broken down into the glucose and fructose, so it has a lower glycemic impact versus if you're comparing that to, you know, a diet soda. You know, again, these are not going to be equivalent, even if those numbers, right? Like you're trying to avoid sugar and you're trying to figure out which one should you drink, drink the kombucha, because even that little bit of sugar is going to be satiety. You're going to get satiety, you're going to have energy, you're going to get, you know, the acids we talked about, you're going to get those B vitamins in living form. And again, we're not talking about massive doses, because that's the other trick of reductionism. Is like, oh, well, I need this massive dose, more is better. And that's not true. Again, it's quality over quantity every day of the week.
So Hannah, going back to that, can we talk about how sugar, because we're talking about fermented tea, so maybe someone's like, well, why are we talking about sugar now? So can we talk about how the sugar comes into the fermentation process?
Yeah, so all fermentation requires sugar in some form or fashion. And so sugars can, like sugar in sauerkraut is coming from the cabbage itself. Sugar in beer is coming from malted grain, right? So they're sprouting the grain and then that releases natural sugars, and that's what they use to make the beer. In wine, the sugar is coming from the grapes. It's a very sweet juice, right? When you drink grape juice, it doesn't taste anything like wine at the back end, because so much of that sugar has become fuel for the microbes that convert it into those unique complex flavor profiles. And the same is true of kombucha. It's not just tea we're fermenting, it's tea and sugar. And then we have Jun, which is kombucha's raw honey cousin. So if you're avoiding sugar, you can always try Jun, which uses honey, which is a lovely sugar source as well. Um, so, but the sugar is really important. Like a lot of people are like, can I make this with less sugar? How do I make a lower sugar version? And the reality is we need to have that ratio, which is about 1 cup per gallon. Maybe you can go down to 3/4 cup. If you go much lower than that, it doesn't taste as good. The organisms don't thrive, and you really miss out on a lot of the nutrients. And so let's say you have in your mind that sugar is toxic. Well, the beauty of fermentation is it's taking it, it's converting it into something that's good for you. And that's what fermentation does. Like sometimes we have phytonutrients or anti-nutrients, things that could be potentially toxic to us, but when we ferment them, like soybeans, for example, right? When we ferment soybeans, we get rid of that toxin and we enhance the nutritional profile so that it has a positive effect on us. This is why, you know, soy sauce is fermented, because we're taking those beans and we're fermenting them into something that's better for us. And so, but sugar is not the demon or the devil we think it is, especially when we consider what source it's in. And if it's fermented, it's going to have that lower impact on our body than if it were consuming the complex carbohydrate, like, you know, a sugar cube or something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking us on that journey. So with the SCOBY, so the way this would work is the SCOBY will rest in this tea concoction, correct? And then maybe how often would you suggest changing that tea? You're still going to leave a portion of that tea within that container. You'll leave a portion of it, is my understanding. Drain the rest out, and you want to change that out. How often would you say?
So there's 2 methods of making kombucha. They're very similar, but they're different. Same, different. So we have batch brew, which is usually done in a smaller vessel without a spigot. So so we make our gallon batch in there, we float our SCOBY in, usually a week to 10 to 14 days. Again, it depends on your brewing conditions. It does require a certain amount of heat because the yeast are temperature sensitive. So we're looking at 75 to 85, with 80 being the sweet spot. And then your taste preference. If you're someone who's new to kombucha, you might want it on the sweeter side. So maybe that 7 days is perfect for you. If you're someone who loves kombucha, you might turn into a sourhead like me. And 14 days is more your style. And of course, the ebb and flow of the seasons is going to impact that as well. So in that process, at the end of it, you'll have a second SCOBY. So that's the daughter. It's very reproductive. Literally, it's abundance in action. And it's a great reminder that if you give an organism what it needs to thrive, it will, yourself included. And so we take out the mother and the daughter. We take out 1 to 2 cups of starter liquid for the next batch. Has to be from the top. Remember, we mentioned yeast and bacteria in symbiosis. Well, we are the stewards of the balance. And so if we only take it from the bottom where all the yeast are hanging out, we very quickly throw that ratio of yeast to bacteria out of balance. And now you have funky brews. They taste weird. They're too sour too quickly. So in batch brew, we always take the liquid off the top. Now, the other style of brewing is called continuous brew, which we consider the safest, easiest, healthiest way to make kombucha. So in this, we're using a larger vessel, so like a 2.5 gallon vessel. We make a 2 gallon batch. It has a spigot. It's going to take twice the amount of culture, starter liquid, etc. It might take twice the amount of time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, again, depending on your taste preference, your brewing conditions. The nice thing is you have the spigot, so you can taste it frequently. And when it has that sweet sour balance you like best, instead of draining the entire vessel, we're only going to take about 50%. And that's because we want to protect that ratio between the bacteria and yeast. But 50% is a gallon. That's your 8 16-ounce bottles. You put your flavoring in your bottles, you line them up, you pour them under the spigot. It's so easy. You don't have to lift your jar. You're not spilling in the sink. Now you top off with sweet tea. And instead of having to wait that 2 to 4 weeks, now you have delicious kombucha ready in a week. But here's some magic that happens. So there are the organic acids I mentioned, the gluconic, glucuronic acid, they are made in higher quantities later in the fermentation process. Now, most people, 30 days in a gallon jar, you're not going to like that flavor. It's going to be a little too intense. But with continuous brew, we are allowing a longer fermentation to occur because we're always leaving some kombucha in the vessel. We're topping it off with the sweet tea. Those sugars introduced to that later stage of fermentation yield more of those healthy acids. And we're tempering the flavor of the sweet tea. Plus, we only clean it once every 3 to 6 months. So that's easy. It's safe because it's always in a pH protected environment. We reduce the risk of mold and contamination. We're not handling the scobies as much. And so we love continuous brew. But many people start with batch brew and then they sort of graduate to continuous brew.
So the continuous brew would be like kind of the second level of brewing. If someone was going to start, they'd want to start with the batch brew first, maybe as a beginner.
Because part of it is also investment in equipment. Like it just costs a little bit more to get a continuous brew set up. So it really depends. I've had plenty of newbies who've never fermented kombucha do the continuous brew and absolutely love it and have perfect kombucha from their first batch forward. Other people, they want to like, oh, let me just try this out first. Maybe they just get a SCOBY or they get a brew now kit with a jar or something like this. So it's a little lower investment, and that way you can just sort of try your hand at it. And then once you realize you like it and you're committed to the process, then you might get the more expensive equipment. So it depends on your personality and who you are and how much are you buying kombucha at the store. Like for me, it was my thirst outgrew my budget. I had to make it at home because I couldn't afford to keep buying it. And so if you're that person, then a continuous brew can be great right off the bat because you know you love it and you know you're going to want to have a lot of it around.
Okay, and then the sugar aspect comes in when you're changing it out with the new tea. You're putting that in the new tea and mixing it up, and it'll dissolve in the tea as you make the tea. And then,
Yeah, so we do what we call a shortcut method to help the sugar dissolve rapidly. And basically we make a concentrate of the tea instead of making a gallon of tea because we mentioned the yeast are temperature sensitive. They're kind of like human beings. They really like this 75 to 80 or 85 with 80 being the sweet spot. If you boil water, that's 212, right? That's gonna be way too hot. We're gonna kill our organisms. And so we do 4 cups of hot water with our tea. After about 10-15 minutes, we strain that out. Then we put in our 1 cup of sugar because it's nice and hot. We stir in the love, stir in the hope, stir in the dreams, let it all dissolve really quickly. And then we top off with cool water. That's going to bring the temperature down quickly so you can immediately float that SCOBY.
okay, and then would it be accurate to say that the sugar is what is feeding the SCOBY because it is a living organism, so it's what's feeding it, right?
The sugar and the tea. So there are nutrients in the tea that also nutrify the organisms and also it converts. So like we know tea is high in polyphenols, well, the fermentation process enhances the polyphenol content. And so you create more antioxidants through fermentation. And this is like the organisms in your gut. When you eat certain foods, they can enhance or extract the nutritional value by pulling out the vitamins and using those throughout your body. And so I think of fermentation as digestion that's happening outside of your gut. And so when you do digestion outside of your gut and you put that food in your body, now your body has less to do because it's already pre-digested, it's already broken down, it's easier for you to process and extract those nutrients from.
Okay, all right. And if somebody were interested and they're like, you're right, it's a lot of money to keep buying this, and I could probably make this for pennies at home, but where do I get a culture? Where do I get a SCOBY? Where would they find something like that?
Well, you always want to get it from a trusted source. So if you don't have a friend, neighbor, someone at your farmer's market who's making kombucha locally, who you can grab a SCOBY from, we are happy to be your trusted source at Kombucha Camp. We use all organic ingredients, only ever have in our nearly 2 decades of cultivating kombucha. And of course, we have quality supplies, information, our book. We're going to make sure that you're educated, that you have the tools you need in order to be successful. You're guaranteed to brew with Kombucha Camp cultures. You want to avoid dehydrated cultures. While some fermentation cultures do just fine after being dehydrated, kombucha really needs that starter liquid. And so you'll find really cheap dehydrated cultures out there. You have to wait 30 days for them to activate. They often go to mold. They often don't reproduce. It's a very disappointing experience. And so spend the few extra dollars, get the living culture. You're going to have kombucha within 7 to 14 days. It's super fast, easy, delicious. You're going to see the magic of the reproduction of how the SCOBY grows. And you won't feel as disheartened that maybe you aren't good at fermentation when you start with the right culture off the top.
Yeah, it's funny because Laura Bender, who does our website, I call her our web wizard, right? She does our website. We were talking, and when she saw that you were going to be a guest, she's like, "Oh my gosh, Hannah Crum, that's who my husband was like obsessed with watching her videos because he wanted to do this at home." So I guess he's watched all your videos, and I think maybe has ordered a culture from you, and that's how he got started. So yeah, but they were so excited, and I know they can't wait. They're like, "Let us know when it's ready to watch," right? So yeah, good stuff for sure. So
Oh, I always appreciate hearing from my fans. I like to tell people I'm a big fish in a small pond, but it's always a blessing that people enjoy what we do. And, we're educators. We just want to make sure you have quality information, then you have quality supplies, and after that, you still have quality support. So our ethics are really that a healthy culture creates healthy boundaries. And everything that I'm talking about, I learned by brewing kombucha. And so, when you start to feel into process, feel into rhythm, trust that when you plant seeds, they come to fruition. Like I said, infinite abundance in action. If you give an organism what it needs, it will thrive. That includes you and this planet. Like, we really live in the Garden of Eden. We live in infinite abundance. We just have to stop treating it like crap and poisoning the hell out of it, and when we do that and we listen to the rhythms of Mother Nature and we work with her, there's enough for everybody. And so really, when we wake up to these lies and these fake foods that we've been eating, we realize there's just so much more that's available to us. We're not really losing as much as we're gaining. So much more nutrition, so much more wisdom, so much more connection, so much more community of organisms living inside of us and on us, and of course all the great organisms we then interact with in the world. So give kombucha a try, give fermentation a try. This is a gateway into so much more, and I just hope everybody will trust their guts and give kombucha a try.
yeah, and Hannah, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, the big book of kombucha, right? That's no joke. So can you tell us a little bit about what people would find in that book?
Yes, it's basically a decade of our lives put into book form. So we have, of course, technique, how-to, recipes. We have 260 flavor inspirations. Let's say your kombucha gets too sour, you don't have to throw it away. We have recipes with kombucha vinegar. We have recipes with the SCOBY. Let's say you don't want to eat them, you can put them in your garden. So it's going to have all kinds of things you can do with that. In addition, we have history, timeline, health benefits, connected to research papers. So, we wanted to make sure that this book had everything you needed. And that's why people lovingly refer to it as their kombucha Bible. I'm honored by that title because it just means it's a book of a tremendous value that people refer to again and again. We think of it as a fun textbook. And so you're going to get a ton of knowledge, information, pictures, inspiration, I hope. And yeah, we're really grateful and love it and hope that you will too.
Yeah, and you had mentioned some of the benefits earlier. Can you go through the list of some more of the benefits and maybe include those again?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the main reason people will come to kombucha is digestive issues. So whether that's indigestion, heartburn, celiac, other types of, things that might be going on in their body that are related to digestion, constipation, diarrhea. The reason it helps on everything is because it goes to the root cause. So it's not about just alleviating symptoms with kombucha. It's about getting into that literal root cause, figuring out what's going on and just trying to help clear those things out. the organic acids are really, really, really the most important part of kombucha. So we hear the word probiotic thrown around a lot. The reality is kombucha is not one of these products that has a ton of bacteria, right? And as we said before, it isn't always about quantity, it's about quality. And so the quality of those organic acids are such that when they bond to toxic molecules in your body, that bond can't be broken. And so through hydrolysis, which is a fancy way of saying you drink water and you pee, those things then exit your body. And our bodies make these organic acids naturally, but as we know, we're overwhelmed with toxins right now. And so getting that extra gluconic and glucuronic acid into our bodies and getting rid of those toxic molecules is really like it's the layers of the onion starting to peel open. And so you might experience initial like energy boost and improved digestion and things like that. But then over time, you'll notice that other things will start to be released as you continue on your kombucha journey.
So let me ask you, if somebody started drinking kombucha for gut health, and then they were like, "Oh wow, my gut feels amazing." Is it something that they have to continue drinking, or like tomorrow they were like, I think I'm done with kombucha for a little bit. Will they be okay? Is there anything that like you have once you start drinking it, you have to keep drinking it, or can you say, "Okay, today's the day I'm not going to drink it for a month"?
Like all things in nature, diversity is key. And so there are people who absolutely love it and swear by it, and that's great. And then you might want to take a break, and that's great too. Mother Nature has provided us this wide diversity of foods and nutrients and herbs and plants because she knows that we need to get these phytochemicals, we need to get these nutrients in different ways and different formats, and that every body is not different. Is not the same. I mean, everybody is different. And so that's why we need to have this diversity. But I think what you'll find is you'll start drinking kombucha, and then now you want to try some sauerkraut, and next you're having some milk kefir, and then it's, miso and koji and kimchi, and just you start to see you have all these friends here to support you. And so definitely don't think that kombucha is the end. It's never the end. It's only the beginning of everything else. And in terms of, I've even taken a break from drinking kombucha for periods of time, and I miss it, and then I come back to it. And so there's an ebb and flow. And so I don't feel like oh, I'm a bad person because I didn't keep doing something. Like we shouldn't think that, right? Like we need to allow our bodies to continue to explore and find the things that support them. But definitely, if you're starting to feel crummy, grab a booch and see if that doesn't help lift your spirits, and maybe it's time to be reunited with an old friend.
Yeah, I love that you're calling these things friends, because that's exactly my viewpoint on it too. Is they're helping us find this balance, right? And they're giving our systems that boost and helping us in ways that maybe we just need a little support. So I love that you're calling them friends. And yeah, it's awesome to know, because I know I've gotten that question as well. If I start that, is my body going to become reliant on it, and then it's something I have to keep up and
Will I get addicted? Again, these aren't drugs. These aren't pharma. These
right.
aren't these aren't things that are designed to have that type of, potentially negative impact on your body. They're food, right? Like people say, what if I have too much? I'm like, well, what if you have too many blueberries? How do you know how many blueberries you should have? Well, at some point, your body's like, all right, I feel satiety. I've gotten what I needed out of this. And certainly, if you eat too many blueberries, you're going to get a stomach ache, right? Like as human beings, we have to explore, but also when we trust, like, you know, fascinating study. Um, they were testing like infants, and they would offer all different types of choices in front of them, and they would gravitate, and they might eat only one type of thing. But over the course of a week, the infant self-selected the diverse range of everything it needed. And what that says to me is just we are hardwired for survival. We are hardwired to know what's actually good for us. The problem is all of the programming, the propaganda, and all of that we have to start to like peel away and get rid of, so that we can come back to trusting those instincts. Really, like they want us divorced from our instincts, because then we'll believe their lies a lot easier. And so, and that's what advertising's for. It's there to make you, to trick you into something. Sometimes those are good things, and sometimes those are things that don't serve you. But the more that we can trust our bodies, trust the information. And again, like even when you go to the doctor, like how many women or people with autoimmune disease or Lyme disease have gone to the doctor, described their symptoms, like, oh, you're making it up. Oh, it's in your head. Oh, you're just a hysteric person. Like, come to find out, like, there really is something to these things. And so nobody, not even a doctor, can know your body better than you. And I'm not saying we all have to go to medical school and become doctors, but the more we trust our bodies and the information they communicate to us, and there's so many modalities. You have Ayurveda, you've got traditional Chinese medicine, you've got acupuncture, chiropractic, sound healing. You've got, like, there's so many ways in which our organism can find this, what serves it intuitively, that we just have to allow ourselves to explore and have fun. And it's okay. Not everything's going to be for you, but sometimes we need to have a cleanse or a juice fast or a water fast or a colonic, and just let things all leave. And then sometimes we need to be gorging and feasting at, the holidays and whatnot, because we are cyclical. We are part of these cycles. And so the more in tune we are with those, then we find the right times to ebb and flow.
Yeah, so true. And I love that because your body knows. Your body knows. You just have to listen. And it's like everything else with the meditation stuff that I teach, and you just need to listen. You're looking for everyone else to tell you what your path should be. You already have the answers. You have them all. They're all inside of you already, but you have to listen, right? So,
Or be willing to explore, right? Because sometimes we can't hear at first, but that's like the exploration, the wanting to try something different. This is often how people come to kombucha. They've tried pharma solutions and those haven't served them. And this is where people end up. Pharma harms you, and then you find something that heals you, and there's this big cycle that goes on. But I think the blessing in all of that harm is that it does drive people back to nature, back to finding things. And so we're all on a healing journey because we've got generational trauma, we have physiological issues, we have epigenetics, which is where you'll have learned memories stored in your DNA. And those can be good memories at times because they'll save you from things, but they can also be trauma and they can be triggered. And epigenetics is this idea that it's not just what's in your DNA, but it's stress, right? Stress ultimately is the thing that kills. And so that stress can come from mental, emotional, physical, diet, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Stress is what kills. And so anything you can do to reduce stress, that's what's going to help you to heal and to be more in balance. And so yeah, I think it's just about being willing and being open to receiving information in different ways, that then you really find we're all connected in this amazing, beautiful planet in a gorgeous universe. And we really do have a lot of opportunity and hope if we're able to be open to that.
yeah. So, Hannah, tell us, there's something called the Kombucha Act. What
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, the Kombucha Act, it stands for Keeping Our Manufacturers from Being Unfairly Taxed While Championing Health Act. I did not come up with this name. Basically, because of the alcohol created by the fermentation process, it serves as a preservative, it's not intoxicating, but it can be above the 0.5% ABV limit set at prohibition for taxation. And so what that means is that kombucha producers are making a raw traditional living kombucha. If their product leaves their facility in compliance at that 0.5% or less, but then through the supply chain or mishandling, or because kombucha is more like a piece of fruit than a soda in that it's alive and it could still change, should those products be pulled off the shelf and tested at 0.6, 0.7, or even 1%, which again still does not have a negative impact on the body health-wise, they could be taxed like beer, and it could force brands into having to become beer producers when they're making kombucha. So clearly there's a mismatch in this, and it's not the first time the laws of man haven't harmonized with the laws of nature. And so the Kombucha Act is there to help support our producers, make sure that you as consumers have access to raw, healthy living kombucha. And so the way that you can help with this is we have a petition. So if you go to kombuchabrewers.org, click on lobbying, you'll see a big petition button. What you're doing when you sign that petition is asking your senators, your Congress people to support the Kombucha Act. So it's just saying, hey, we want access to these products. please support this act. And that way, when the right legislation comes up and this gets included in a bill, people aren't protesting. We don't know what this kombucha thing is. We're not going to support this. Rather, they're educated. They know their constituents want it. And so this is a way you can in 5 minutes support kombucha, whether you drink it, make it, brew it, or even hate it, but you just want people to have access to raw traditional living foods, then please sign the Kombucha Act.
Awesome, awesome. And if you, going back to what Hannah just said, if you have tried it and you're like, that wasn't for me, try another kind. It's just like when someone comes to sound healing and they tell me, like, yeah, I tried this before. I don't know. I'm here because my friend wanted me to come today, but I tried it before. And I'm like, I'm glad you're here trying it again, because different people, different energies resonate with other people. Some resonate, some don't. So you know what? If you didn't like the first one, try a different kind and see if maybe that's the one for you. And maybe it's not, but at least you'll know, right? Just don't go with the one, right? Open mind, open perspective on things. So much great information. And if somebody's like fired up and they're like, okay, SCOBY, kombucha, gut health, where do I sign up, right? They can do something called the Kombucha Camp.
Kombucha Camp with a K, because we're cute and clever. But Kombucha Camp is our website, ton of free information. Sign up for our free DIY guide and ebook. That's going to give you an email a day for 5 days. It's going to help you understand all of these things we just talked about, break it down into more digestible chunks, so to speak. If you know you love it and you know you want it, you're also going to click on shop. That's going to take you right to our, we have more than just kombucha. We have kombucha, Jun, milk kefir, and water kefir. So we have your living bacteria. We're bacteria farmers. And we've got kits, we've got culture. So if you just want a culture, great. If you want the whole shebang, we've got that. Hey, you're not sure what you want? Call me. Yes, literally. My phone number is on that website. If I'm around, I'll answer. If not, I'm going to call you back. But I do all the phone orders. So obviously, as you can tell, I'm quick with the information. I'm going to help get what you need, because I don't want to sell you something you don't want. You're just going to make me miserable later and complain. So I'm going to make sure that I'm getting what you need, what you want, in order to support your health, your family's health. So yeah, reach out anytime. Kombucha Camp. We're also on all of the social media platforms, I think. Well, a lot of them. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, videos are there, Pinterest, fun graphics. I do a Mama Mondays, whether that's an Ask Mama Anything, where I answer your questions, or we have really cool guests from all different types of perspectives, or videos, how-tos, and things like that. So that's on Instagrams at 9 a.m. PST most Mondays. So come check us out, follow us, comment, like, subscribe, share your pictures. We want to reshare. We want to be part of this community, this kombucha family. We want you to come participate with us and find your kombucha peeps.
I love it. I love it, because it is. I mean, it's really about connection, and just the more information that we can share, right? It gives us choices again. So Hannah, I've got to ask you, do you have a favorite flavor kombucha?
Fave, hashtag Fave. Yes, I do. Mine is Love Potion 99. You can find the recipe in the book. It is blueberry, lavender, rose. I love drinking my flowers. And you may have noticed I'm drinking this kombucha here. This is elderflower lemon. So I like to change it up with the seasons. I also have the summer breeze, chamomile lavender, but really play with what's in season. If you know herbalism, kombucha is a great vehicle for transmitting that. Of course, be educated on it. Not all herbs you could just take as willy-nilly, so you want to be educated, but kombucha is a wonderful vehicle for sweet, savory. I mean, this is the 260 flavor. We have mushroom kombucha, we have salsa kombucha. So you can do like anything. It's a palette, it's a blank canvas, and you can play on it.
That's fantastic. Is there anything at all that you would like to share that we haven't talked about?
Well, really all I want to do is, so normally when I teach a class, we do a giant human SCOBY. So this is where we throw out our nanofibers of cellulose, our connection, like our bacteria buddies, and we all hold hands and we feel the energy together. So why don't we just do that right now with our hearts, with our minds, with our souls? This is how we change the world one gut at a time. When like minds, like hearts, like passions, like peoples come together in community and say, we're not going to take it. But how we're going to do that is with love, with kindness, with rebuilding. We are here. There's more of us than there are of them, and we are here to build community. So that is what we do.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing everything you've shared. It's so great to connect with you, and I'm super excited to try all these recipes. So my SCOBY, now there are several of them, right? But Obi-Wan SCOBY, my SCOBY, and says hello. So I promised. I'm like, I'll make sure Hannah hears your name.
Mama loves ya.
Yes. Yes. So thank you very much. So again, one more time, your site where people can find you.
Kombucha Camp, camp with a K. Hannah Crum, the Kombucha Mama, kombuchabrewers.org. Just kombucha and Hannah, you'll probably find me.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. So yes. All right, Hannah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
All right. Have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.